Today I'm sitting with Tyson. Thanks so much for being with me.
You're welcome.
We thought we'd put together a little video for you guys, taking home your new pooches, just to talk a little bit about the training process that we recommend everyone do with their pups. And Tyson offered to help kick it off a little bit. Thanks so much. So first of all, one of the most commonly asked questions I am asked as a breeder is, when should a new family take their pup for training?
Yeah, so typically we find the younger the better. So you typically take a pup home at 8 weeks of age there. So some people like to have maybe a week where they can kind of get to know the dog, and then maybe they might come for training at that point. They go through a socialization period from about 5 weeks to 12 weeks of age. So whatever they see within that time and have a good experience with, they'll tend to like later on. Whatever they have a bad experience or no experience with, they'll tend to not like later on. So you can take advantage of that period and do a lot of your proper socialization, which doesn't actually mean going up and checking it out, but exposing them. So you can really set the dog off on the right foot, because when they come home, they're kind of like ground zero. They haven't done a lot of good or bad. So if you can kind of get them on that path of doing good, they don't get into any of the bad habits. So you're not trying to fix any of those down the road. So it's really easy to get off on the right foot and do really well with the dog.
So if a family couldn't make multiple trips to this area, even when they pick up their pup from us, they're only about 8 to 9 weeks old.
Yeah.
Would that be an option to come straight to you?
Yep, and I've had clients do that before, and that works out really good. So, I mean, the pup might be tired, we'll do a little bit of training there, but it's way more training people than it is of training the dog. So as long as, the dog already kind of knows the rules, as long as we do, then the dog understands and they do quite well. So if you come earlier, you kind of avoid any problem behaviors, and we can kind of really go over the human side of training. If they were to wait a week or so, well, then the pup might have a little bit more energy. We can do more training with the dog, but that's kind of the easy part, but they also can start developing some bad habits. So we typically recommend sooner than later.
Perfect, absolutely. One of the other questions I commonly get from my families includes what type of training to do. There's a lot of different feedback from the types being positive reinforcement or negative.
Yeah, so a lot of trainers will tend to be like one side or the other, either really on the positive side or really on the force side there, and each side has its pros and cons. So we classify dogs into 3 different categories. So you'd have your alphas, which are the boss or think they are. Betas are not the boss but would like to be. So if there's no clear leadership, they try to take over that alpha position. And then you have omegas, which are so easygoing, doesn't matter what you do, they always want to please and follow. Those are the ones that really require no effort for training, but I always joke they're kind of good for like 80-year-old women or men that just want a lap dog they can spoil. They're not smart enough to manipulate you and try to take over.
That's my dog.
Yeah, so I like the betas, and that's what I find Starstruck Labs will fall in that beta category there. So you start getting intelligence once you hit that category, but you get respect closer to the omega side. So I really like those for family pets. But in the past, like I get a lot of clients that have already seen other trainers. So if you just do reward training, these dogs are smart enough that they'll learn good behaviors really fast. But if they do anything bad, the go-to of reward training is that you try to redirect the treat or a toy. But a smart dog will be able to figure that out, and you'll actually make the bad behavior worse because they think they get rewarded for it. So you'll actually end up doing a lot of reward, but you also need a little bit of consequence, and you have to show enough leadership that the dog respects you, and then they'll listen. So we teach people how to do that, but people think of it like force, where you're using really hard corrections, or you're yelling, or you're really harsh, and it's not that. It's just some really kind of simple rules, and then there's some easy ways to solve that, and then you get a good dog. But if people just do reward with a lab, yeah, they'll get really good, but you typically won't be able to solve your recall. They're usually not as good for coming back when called, so you can't trust them off leash. Heel, they're usually terrible for pulling on the reward side, because you end up rewarding the pulling. If they pull and you call them back at the treat, you end up rewarding the pulling. And then the other common thing we get from people with just reward training with betas is jumping or nipping. So whereas if you just did force training, it's typically too much for a beta. You'll end up crushing spirit because they don't always figure out what you're trying to get them to do. So if you're correcting a dog thinking they know better but they don't, then that's where you run the risk of breaking spirit in the dog. So we do a balance. So it depends on what type of dog somebody comes. We'll teach them, which side you'd pull from or how you do it proper. So in the end, you end up with a super happy dog, but you also get a really respectful and obedient dog too. So you get a really good family pup.
Perfect. Now, I know we were going to stick to 3 questions, but something else just popped into
Sure.
my mind. You can tell the difference between an alpha, a high beta, a medium, a low, and an omega.
Yes.
You just had the opportunity to see 12 of our pups today.
Yeah.
I try to tell families that I send my pups home like essentially blank slates that haven't been trained to do or not do too much. What did you think of the pups you saw today?
I really like the pups for family pets. I like in that low beta category because you start getting that intelligence, but you get closer to the omega side. So you can have a lot of fun with that dog, but they'll challenge you a little bit, but as long as you know how to follow the rules and have the right amount of consequence for that dog, they'll be super good. So they work really well for that. So I liked even all the way through the spread because you'll see differences, but even the ones that would score higher, I would still find really good for a family pet. And then there were some that were like slightly on that lower side that would just be a little bit more laid back, you know, so if somebody wasn't too keen to follow on rules, they'd still actually do quite well.
Don't tell them they can go easy. Which leads me right into our very next and our last question is what families can expect when they take a pup or a dog to you for training. And I can say from personal experience, Tyson has just spent the afternoon with us, and I feel like I have just taken on so much information in one day. It seems like it's a lot, but I also feel like I understand my dogs and my puppies so much better. So tell us a little bit about how you do that, how you work with families in such a quick time and they get so much.
Yeah, so what we do a 4-hour training session where typically it's 2 hours to go over the human side of training, which is really the important side. And then the other 2 hours we do hands-on with the dog, teaching the techniques, and that's the easy side. I always tell people, if you can talk, you can hold food, and you can hold a leash, those are technically all the skills you need to know in order how to train a dog. The human side, I always joke that dogs are the easy ones to train, people are the hard ones because the dogs already understand all these rules, and as long as we understand it, we know how to break it down for that particular dog, then you do really well with training. So we do 1 4-hour course, and it actually started that we did board and train where the dogs would come out for a month, we train them up fully, and then I'd send them home. Well, the reason we stopped doing that is that if the people didn't follow through on the right amount of rules, the average was 2 months, people would contact us saying the dog wasn't doing what they're trained to do, getting into trouble. So I thought, oh, okay, well, how do they forget everything in 2 months? Bring them back out, they didn't forget a thing, they do whatever I tell them to do. They're like, oh, right, Tyson's the boss, I gotta listen to that guy. So we were thinking of doing, well, maybe we'll breed dogs, or we'll sell pre-trained dogs. And I looked into that. I was like, wow, there's a lot to doing that right. So I thought, well, I'm just going to look for a good breeder, and that led us to Starstruck. I was like, yeah, okay, that's who I'd pick if I was going to source a dog. And so, anyways, then in the meantime, while I was training dogs for board and training, we'd have people want to come out to do training. They'd say, well, I'd like to do training with you, but I want to do it myself. So I said, oh, come out for a few hours, we'll go over. And then we had the best success with that platform because I used to do group classes, like a 6-week group class, 1 hour a week. A lot of those dogs, by the end of 6 weeks, you could barely tell they went through any kind of training. I used to do where I'd go to their home and I'd train the dogs. I trained with them. We did board and train, but we actually found this platform worked the best because once the people kind of got that crash course, how do you be the leader? How do you break it down? Does my dog need consequence, or do I need to break this down so they understand better? Then the people train really quick that way. And you get some people that got a really busy life schedule, so it's hard for them to commit to once a week, so they really like where they can come out. Or sometimes I get people that travel a long ways. Like I've had clients drive like 9 hours one way from Saskatchewan. I've had people drive out from the island. Like we get people from Edmonton, Fort McMurray, BC, like all over the place. So that's why we do the 1 4-hour course, because it's actually way more training the people than training the dog. So once the people know, the dog does just fine.
I've been known to say, and I know you hate this term, but I've been telling people all along that Tyson is our very favorite dog whisperer. But the truth is, he doesn't whisper to dogs. He teaches dogs and people to talk to each other, and that's a pretty amazing thing.
Yeah, it's a lot of miscommunication among species. As long as we understand each other, then they do really well. Yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, thanks so much, Tyson. This has been fantastic.
Yeah, it's my pleasure.
I look forward to working with you more in the future.
Yeah, thank you. Us too.
Wonderful. See you later.
Bye.